I'm really excited about giving you this talk. I give it a lot because growth mindset sets you up for success, whatever you're doing in life. And having a growth mindset and recognizing what you need to do to keep it will give you confidence, will help you in the things that you want to do. But I'd like to start by asking a question. How many of you are familiar to some extent with the difference between growth mindset and a fixed mindset? Hands up. Okay, so quite a few of you, but quite a few of you don't. And even if you do know it, what I like to do is have you go through exercises. I'm going to be explaining the differences between the two, and I'm going to use examples from the corporate world. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I use RTT in the corporate world, because I think there's so many examples of CEOs with limited mindsets that send companies into, oh, I have somebody shaking their head. Yes, thank you very much. I've worked for some people like that as well. And they send the companies into bankruptcy. And I think it gives you a good idea of the things that can get in the way of your success. Now, just briefly, I wanted to talk about, see, it's today, isn't it? I'm doing it. He wasn't sure I was going to do this today. Neither was I, actually. But my background has nothing to do to therapy. I was a nuclear fuel broker that started a world global nuclear fuel company, brokerage and consulting when I was 29, and I stayed in that industry for a long time. So you couldn't go as far away from therapy, in my view, as you did. And I stayed in corporate for a long time and decided that it was really getting to me. I developed chronic insomnia, which Marisa helped me get over when I trained with her. And I was on call all the time, and I thought, I want to get out and start helping people. I wanted to help people mostly in business because I understood in the trading world, in finance and brokerage, that you're working 24/7. And this is how I got into this. And I have to say I had to overcome my own limiting belief, because even as recently, because by the way, we all have vestiges of growth and limited mindset in us. We are never 100% one way or the other. And Andrea, if you ever want to add into that, you're welcome to do it. So as recently as last year, I had someone who was the head of a risk analytics firm in the city contact me to say, could you come in, and because I do executive coaching as well, could you come in and train some of my directors? And I said, do they want coaching, or is this your idea? And he said, no, they want it. And I said, okay, I want to talk with them first. But as he and I were talking, and I was asking him, what's your expectation? How long do you want them to have this? And he said 1 year. And I said, let's try 6 months and go from there. I said, this is how I work with people. And then I mentioned, but if they have blocks on things, I can use hypnotherapy. And his eyes shot off, and I thought, oh, I lost him. And I said, or maybe not. Maybe we'll just stick with coaching. And he said, no, I'm just thinking, I need you to work with me because I'm so aggressive. I lose staff. They're turning over all the time. So you know what? I even have to catch myself coming off the limited mindset, because I thought, this guy, I could tell he was aggressive. He's in finance. He has to prove that he's a man. And he wants help with something. So I just passed that on. Be confident. Those of you who decide, whatever you're doing generally, but if you decide to move ahead with RTT, if you're interested in studying that, you can use this in every walk of life, for yourself, for your friends and family, of course. You can move it into business. It has a home there. But let's just carry on. There's a nice blank screen. Now, this is what I've said, a growth mindset sets you up for success. And there's, I don't know, can you see over here a little bit? Okay. There's a quote, if you click again, Andrea, from a fellow that used to be the CEO of Kimberly-Clark, which is a pharmaceutical company in the States. And for anyone who can't read that, he said, I never stopped trying out, or something like this. Yeah, I never stopped trying to be qualified for the job. This is a growth mindset because he never sat on his laurels. He was always asking questions. He was always trying to do things, to learn from people that he was working with, always trying to be qualified for the job. A lot of times what you find, again, in all walks of life, particularly in business, where's my lady who shook her head? You'll understand this. CEOs will take the job and they park themselves. Now, a lot of them don't do it, but I've worked with some who have, where they feel, I've made this now, Everybody knows I know what I'm doing, I can handle the board, I can do what I want, and they sometimes get into the position where they don't want to hear what anybody else has to say, and this is where they get into trouble. But this is what I love about the quote, because this to me embraces growth mindset. And if we can have the next slide. These are the differences between the two. There are more that you could have. For those of you that may not be able to see it, in a growth mindset, people believe that you don't have limited talents. In other words, you're not just born with a finite set of skills. You are learning throughout your life. You can change what you're doing. A fixed mindset, or someone with a limiting belief, will think, oh, I can't do this. You know, I'm only good at this one thing. I've never tried this. I won't be able to do it.
I'm sorry,
That's okay. It's one of those days. Other limited mindsets are, if somebody else does something wrong, I'm not going to step in there because I don't want to be blamed for this. Whereas the growth mindset, here we are, we're back. The growth mindset is, you know what, I may not know what I'm doing right now, but I'm going to continue trying. I'm going to get in there and help out. In a growth mindset, you're not afraid of making mistakes. You understand we're all human. You take chances. In some companies that I'll talk about, you're rewarded for taking chances. A lot of these are tech companies like Google and Microsoft, where they actually, I should say, inspire people to take chances because you can create things by doing that. Growth mindset, you're always looking at learning. And I'll have a slide coming up where CEOs with growth mindsets continually ask questions. You've probably heard the phrase, no question is too stupid, right? But then how many of you have been in situations where you have a question and you feel nobody else is raising their hand, I don't want to ask this question because they might think I'm stupid. Look, sometimes I do that as well, but I force myself to ask the question. This is growth mindset. This is what continuous learning is about. Is this all making sense? Those of you that have a feeling, yes, shaking heads, very good. Fixed mindset, I get frustrated, I'm giving up because I'll never be able to do this. It's the internal dialogue that we have in our head as well that lets us down. The internal dialogue that says, I can't do it, I'm going to look stupid, oh, it's taking too long, what will they think of me? And this will also affect your confidence, because what we tell ourselves, and any of you that have listened to Marisa on YouTube, or if you've done any courses with her, she talks about how our subconscious mind does what it thinks we want it to do. And it does that based on what we tell ourselves and the pictures that we have in our mind. So if you think for a moment about having an internal dialogue that's constantly saying, I can't do this, I'm not enough, oh, they're going to make fun of me. What is that saying to your subconscious mind? Where are you going to develop your confidence? If you have those kinds of thoughts running through your head, it'll be very difficult. But the flip side of that is we control our thoughts. They don't control us. Often, I work with clients who wake up in the middle of the night and their mind is spiraling. They're like the hamster on the wheel, where maybe some of you have had this as well, that you can't get your thoughts to stop. You think, oh, I just want to go back to sleep. And a great way of doing that is you just say to yourself, stop. And that stops the conscious mind from what it's doing. And you think of a couple of positive thoughts. Take control when these things happen. You reframe the thoughts, but I'm going to get into that in a minute. So let's move on to the next one. Now that was a quick run through of growth and fixed. But you know, these concepts are very easy to understand. This isn't rocket science. It's everyone can understand, if I think this way, this is going to benefit me, versus if I think this way, it won't. So what I'd like you to do for just a few minutes, and you can talk between yourselves or among yourselves, I want you to think of a problem or of an issue that you've had to deal with, and come up with several examples of what would be a growth mindset when you address that issue or problem, and what would be a limited mindset. And I have people do this because, as I'd said earlier, I think that to embody this work, to understand it, you need to practice it. So it's one thing me standing up here, finally, with the microphone and telling you about it, but it's another thing to practice it, and I think it's helpful to work with others. So is that clear? Just take a few minutes. You can get in little groups. Please don't move your chairs around because it took us forever to get these in here. But you can turn around and talk to people, and I'll just give you about 3 minutes. It'll be very quick, and then I might ask you to share some of the things that you've come up with, okay? So over to you. Oh, that's okay. I thought it was...
I just thought it'd be easier to have it here. I didn't realise it was going to come undone there.
That's fine. I'm just going to do it...
You did it very well,
Oh, thank you.
Shall I leave it at that one? Let me next time.
Thank you. Hello. How's the tone and pace? I'm going to take a walk. Are you working on this?
Yeah.
Are you working on this?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm a CEO.
Okay. Me too.
Keep the noise down a bit because they can't hear Sean.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Can I just ask you as you're talking, just keep it down a little bit because Sean's having a hard time hearing herself talk. So if you could just talk with your inside voices to the best you can. Thank you. Maybe I'm not good. What? No? Do you want it?
Calm and passionate.
Yeah. I do this talk so much, but I may skip over the other exercise just to give us some more time on things. Because I want to leave some time talking more about RTT. And well, I gave my limited example of the guy in the risk analytics firm and how I could take it in and all those things.
Worked in the nuclear fuel energy.
Sorry?
I'm going to an energy conference next week.
Oh, an energy conference, really?
Yeah, in London. It's a women thing, and it's for energy.
Oh,
Send you some information.
not nuclear fuel energy, but
Like,
Oh.
not internal energy, but, they've got somebody from Shell and all sorts of people talking.
okay. Boom.
How long are they going to be talking for? Because it's very loud.
Okay, all right, then it's still loud. Okay, everyone, if I could just have your attention. It looks like I'm not going to be able to have you do too many examples because the sound carries in this venue and Sean can't hear. So was that good? Did you have enough time to come up with a few? Yeah? Does anybody have anything that they'd like to share that they discovered or... Oh, you're being picked out.
Yeah, she had a good one.
Okay, here.
I was just saying I had this fixed mindset and I found excuses for myself for being me, and then suddenly I didn't feel comfortable being me anymore, and step by step I got this growth mindset, and now all of a sudden I really like myself.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. That's really nice. Thank you for sharing. Okay, we're going to move on a bit. Let's just go to 2 slides forward. So I talked earlier about the internal dialogue, and these are just some of the thoughts that can happen when you're in a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So the growth mindset is, I'm not sure I can do this yet, but I'll give it a try. They never give up. Although I have to say, there is such a thing as too much of a growth mindset, because if you keep trying something and it's not working, at some point you have to say, maybe this isn't working, and you have to move on. So it's that old adage of having too much of a good thing. But the other thing is, all great leaders make mistakes. Now, this was something when I was heading up the companies that I had, sometimes I would forget because I'd say, why can't they get this? Why don't they just get this done? And then I realized that what I'd asked them to be doing, they being my staff, wasn't what we really needed to have done. Everybody makes a mistake. It doesn't matter what position you're in. And one of the attributes of a great leader is to be self-effacing, to say, oh, I've made a mistake, and not be concerned about doing that, or at least saying that or admitting that, which takes a certain amount of confidence and understanding that you're not going to be judged for having admitted making a mistake. Because let's face it, we're human, everybody makes mistakes. I'll take responsibility for it and try to fix it, and I'll learn from it. Often what happens in business, at least, is somebody, I used to see this all the time, people would say, that's not my department, that's not what I did. And I'd say, why don't you help out? Well, no, that's not it, because they were concerned that if something went wrong, they would be blamed for it. And I know that when I had staff and was running companies, I would say, you know, I want you to learn, I want you to grow into this, because to me, it's about growing people so that they have the experience, that they can grow as people. And sometimes people in companies will also say, well, if I train somebody up to do what I'm doing, I'll be out of a job. And I'd say, let's reframe this. What you're doing is you're going to free up time for yourself that you could devote to something else. If you're not the head of the company, or if you're not the head of a division, you could be coming up with ideas to take to your manager and then be seen as someone who could add more to the company. And it takes a while for them to believe this because they're concerned about losing the job, but this is what a growth mindset is. Helping people, it's about collaboration, and when you do that, you're going to have less competition, you're going to have less turnover in a company, but I'll get to that in a little bit. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The fixed mindset, or the limited beliefs, or limiting beliefs, is just the opposite of everything I'm saying. And the internal dialogue, I don't have the skills, and I mentioned it earlier, if I fail, everybody's going to laugh at me. Okay, maybe they will laugh at you, but that's them, not you. And why are they laughing at you? What does that say about them? And this is the classic one, right? Hey, it's not my fault, somebody else did this, rather than taking control of it or taking some responsibility for making it better. So if we move on, I'm just going to watch my time since we started late. I want to talk a little bit about mindsets. And the thing is, how many in here have trained in NLP? Raise your hands. Great, so quite a few of you. Have you trained with Richard Bandler? Yeah? He's an interesting character. Yes, I know you have. One of the things that Richard always says in his training is we're born with two things, a fear of loud noises and the fear of being dropped. And what that means is everything else that we've learned through our life, through experience, through people telling us things, beliefs that we pick up from our parents. And the good news about that is that something that you've learned, you can unlearn. And the key thing is, and it's another thing about taking control of your thoughts, because you weren't born with limited beliefs. You weren't born having fears of things or lack of confidence. Somewhere along the line, you picked that up. And this is what I find so brilliant about RTT as a technique, because you go into the root cause of finding out why somebody has the belief. You go back to the scenes. And this, I believe, is what makes the change so phenomenal, because people go back to the scenes that they have, and they understand from their grown-up perspective how they develop that belief, and they recognize, okay, I might have thought that that was accurate then, but it's not accurate now, and you look at it from a different perspective. You disassociate from those beliefs that you had, and you can move on, and this is how you make the change. The beliefs come from our childhood experiences, parental messages. As with a lot of RTT therapists, I see people that have phobias of various things. And I saw someone come in once and she said, well, I think it was when I was 4 years old and I went into a lift with my father and it stopped between floors. And everyone went, huh? And how would you know at 4 years old that a lift is scary? Which it's not for most people. And I wanted to work with her because, as a matter of fact, she was a family member, which is always a tricky one. And she said, no, I don't really want to get past this because this identifies me. It was her secondary game. She wanted to stay afraid of getting on lifts and having claustrophobia because it made her who she was. So I had to do some reframing there. Well, what if you didn't have that? How about you were the person that was known for something else, being the life of the party, being willing to go everywhere, leading the way? And she did eventually agree, and she did eventually get over it. But that was a childhood experience of that coming on to her. What we say to ourselves, and there is a phrase, I can't remember who came up with it, that it was something like this: even though you've been telling yourself something for a long time, doesn't mean it's true. It just means you've been telling yourself this for a long time. And Byron Katie, if any of you are familiar with her work, the questions where you ask yourself, is this true? Is it really true? How do you know it's true? So I suggest you start, if you don't already do this kind of work, when you have a thought or a limiting belief, start questioning the genesis of it. Well, yeah, I've been thinking this, but what proof do you have that it's actually true? And again, this is something I mentioned earlier, the pictures that we have in our minds. We can change so much. You NLPers in here will know that. Creating the picture, the phobias and fears that you have, the picture is large, it's in color, it's moving, it might have sound. And you shrink that down to a small size and you bring up what you want and you put the colors into that. You disassociate your mind from things and you can move away from limiting beliefs. And RTT does the same thing by the disassociation that you have in the scenes, by going through RFPI, role, function, purpose, intention, understanding why that belief is there, helping you to help the client get past what's there. And sometimes the scenes in their mind are the pictures that they've got in their mind, and you change that, and it changes their life, and it changes the issue or phobia, whatever it is that they've come in with. So you can move on. Thank you very much. So neuroplasticity, I think I heard Marisa say that this morning. This is a very buzzy word these days in neuroscience, and I always like to say when I'm going into the city or if I'm back in Wall Street in New York, and I say, yeah, well, when I've studied neuroscience, just kind of get the foot in the door. But we are living in such an amazing time with the advent of things like functional magnetic resonance imaging, which has actually pinpointed where the blood flows in the brain. And this is where we're getting a lot of information as to how the brain works and what happens as we're thinking about different things. Our brain is always learning. And I've now started what is essentially my third career. I was in nuclear fuel as a broker. Then, more recently, I'd say I left 4 years ago from the last role, so 14 years before that, I went to a company that publishes indices that traders use to settle contracts, and I headed up the global division of the team that did that. It was still in energy trading, but it was slightly different. And now I've changed to do executive coaching and RTT. And if at any time I had a limiting belief, I never would have been able to get to where I am now. And this is a very soft plug, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but I had a book published last September called More to Give, Stepping into Your New Life at Any Age. And it's a result of all the studies that I have done in terms of neuroplasticity, how our brains work, and also the work that I do with clients who've reached a crossroads where they want to do something different. So this is typically people in their 50s and 60s that are saying, I want to do something else now. Their children have grown, if they're married, and they're thinking, I've done this for a long time, and I work with people that are heads of companies, lots of senior managers who are unhappy. They feel trapped, and I felt trapped like this in my job because there were silver handcuffs. I was waiting for the company to go part public because I would get more for the shares, but at what cost? And some other people feel this way as well. I think, well, if I leave this, will I recreate the success that I have now? And then sometimes they get caught up into the title. Yes, but I like this title, it feels good. And I say, you are not your title. These are just words. You can come up with a different title. You are so much more than that. And by the way, somebody else came up with that title, so make up your own. Have some fun with it. Creating new neural pathways. This is part of what happens when you listen to the recording for 21 days after the RTT session. The change has already happened in the subconscious mind. It takes the conscious mind a little bit of time to catch up, but it's cementing that pattern. It's creating the new neural pathway. Because our minds naturally go negative. Some of you may know this. It stems back to when man was first developing, where you were going to eat or be eaten. So there's a very strong correlation of that throughout the ages. And actually going negative helps us in some situations. If we're in trouble, we want to be able to get out of there quickly, either fight or I would run away, depending on what's going on. But you have to overcome that. But just as you have the negative neural pathway, you can create positive neural pathways. That's what the tape does that you give to clients after RTT, but you yourself can create your own positive neural pathway. And one of the things that I do with my clients is every day think of 3 positive things. And it doesn't have to be an exhaustive exercise, because I get a lot of analysts and they're saying, well, I could do this and I could do this. And I was like, oh my God, you're taking forever. Just be happy it's not raining. or the tube's working, or I'm on Southern and they're not on strike or something like that. It could be whatever it is. Just doing these kinds of things will actually change your brain chemistry. You will affect your, and I haven't talked about these chemicals well, the dopamine, the serotonin, and oxytocin, the 3 feel-good things in the brain. And you know, you can even test this out by saying to yourself, if you think for a moment of negative phrases, you might think of the last time you had an argument and somebody said something really negative to you, you will feel that. And if you, I don't want to have you actually drop into it, but you'll feel that in your body. And the cortisol is going to be starting to rise in your brain. It's starting to affect your mind already. But if you then think of a positive memory, that's going to change and bring up all those feel-good memories, which are much better for you, because cortisol stays in your body for a long time. And cortisol, as many of you may know as well, has been shown to lead to heart attacks, heart problems, and this sort of thing. So you want to avoid having a lot of cortisol in the body. So creating new neural pathways is something that you can easily do. It takes some practice. It doesn't happen overnight. So if you have issues with confidence, for example, so Sean had said to me, she wanted me to talk a little bit about confidence, that people were interested in it. And by the way, this goes back to the time of either Aristotle or Socrates, who was talking about confidence. So this is sort of the angst of mankind, if you will. People have been dealing with this for a long time, but you can take steps to overcome it. Practice getting the positive neural pathway. The more you do these things, the easier they become. Change the pictures you see. I mentioned earlier for the NLP types, if you see something that you're afraid of, it's going to be a large picture and you shrink it down. But think positive things. If you're feeling down or you're feeling low, get another picture in your mind. Now this works if you're a visual person. If you're not a visual person, maybe it's a feeling. Think of something that's made you feel positive in the past and concentrate on that feeling and make it bigger and stronger. Or if you're an auditory person, think of something that you've been told that made you feel good. Maybe you got praised for something at work. This will also change the chemistry in your brain. It doesn't have to just be visual. And by the way, with RTT, I get a lot of clients that don't have scenes, but the beauty of Marisa's technique is that even if you don't have scenes, you can go to the feeling. And if you don't do that, then there's other things that you can do. So we can have the next slide. I mentioned before self-effacing as the mindset of the best leaders. And these are things, because I do this talk a lot for government, I do a lot of work with different government. In fact, I delivered this to a cabinet office retreat 2 days ago, and I think it's wonderful. I think Trump could use some of this, because I can never refrain from mentioning my Trump and having a look on my face. Another vote that never went anywhere. But asking questions until they understand. This is what good leaders do. They keep asking questions. They want to understand different points of view. You don't get blindsided this way. They don't back down when things get tough. This has been a leitmotif through my talk. This is also an important point. The best leaders don't have as their goal trying to be a leader. No, that doesn't mean everybody's this way. And I think that there are natural born leaders that naturally rise. And you said you're a CEO. Did you want to be a CEO? Was that your goal?
To be honest, yes.
Yeah, but that's fine, because you need that determination. And when I started companies, I wanted to have that as well. So when I talk about these things, they're not absolutes, like this is, if you did want to be a leader, it's a bad thing. It's just, it can be an indication of somebody who takes it to the nth degree, if I put it that way, where they're trying too hard. They're roughshotting over other people. They're not listening to other people because it's their way, and they're going to just walk all over people to get to the top. And again, the best leaders believe in learning, taking risks, taking mistakes, and allowing people to grow, because by giving people that freedom, you're building their confidence. So give yourselves a break as well, okay? You can take some risks, and you can get past it and learn from it. I mean, take measured risks. Don't just go out and spend all of your money on the lottery and hope that you'll get a winning ticket. This is not a good risk to take. Okay, the next one. I know this is very small text. I wanted to give you an example of companies that have growth mindsets, and there's a lot of tech companies that have that. So Microsoft got a new CEO about 4 years ago, or a little over 4 years now, and he believes in continuous learning. And every month, I think it is, he releases a video of the things that he's learned that month. So he started creating this culture within the company, along with a number of other things, and the revenues have gone up for Microsoft. And at Google, one of the things that I like that they do is they started a policy a while back of, sorry, I just got distracted a little bit, telling me the time. They started hiring people that didn't necessarily have degrees from universities because they understood that people had skills and they could work in the job. And I remember I started doing, not in the companies that I had because I always did that, but when I was working for the last company here, I would hire people without degrees if I felt they had the requisite skills. And I used to get a lot of flack from the CEO, but usually they worked out well. So the thing is, take a chance on people. Okay, next mindset. And this is a quote that I like: if you're a super smart CEO, don't spend your time proving how smart you are. Be wise and spend your time helping other people be the heroes. And this is from Marshall Goldsmith, who's an executive coach in the States. Okay, the next one. We've got about 15 minutes, so I'm going to keep going. Leaders with fixed mindsets, basically the opposite of everything I've just said. And again, this is to the nth degree, and there's variations in this. They can be self-absorbed. They don't have the patience to listen. And I'm going to show you in just a minute what happens. I mentioned earlier, companies have gone bankrupt as a result of this. They believe in their inherent superiority, and yes, I have worked for people like that. Fear that others will take credit. I don't know if you're familiar here with Lee Iacocca, who used to be the head of Chrysler. I mentioned this in another government presentation I was giving, and the audience was so young. I swear they were about 13, but maybe not. And nobody had heard of Lee Iacocca, so I thought I'm going to move past that as an example. But he'd been at Ford, and he left Ford because Ford the second didn't choose him to replace him as the CEO of the company. So he went to Chrysler, and in the beginning he did a very good job of turning things around. But they started getting competition from the Japanese cars coming into the American market, and he said, no, not going to do it. And a lot of good ideas had been brought to him, but he was very afraid of other people taking credit. And eventually the board had to get rid of him because he'd really almost put that company, after having saved it and revived it, almost put it out of business. So we'll go to the next. So very briefly, these are some of the companies whose CEOs made decisions that led to their dissolution. Enron. Does anybody remember Enron, big trading company? Yeah, some of you have. They had a culture of superiority, and I knew people that worked at Enron, very bright people. I would never take that away from them. And they came up with the idea of round-trip trading, which I won't go into, but it eventually started catching up with them. But to be seen as having made a mistake in Enron was the end of your career, or so they thought, and this is what eventually happened. They just wouldn't acknowledge that they were making mistakes, or that something that they were doing wasn't going to work, and the company imploded in 2001. Kodak, interesting, Kodak, everybody knows, really well known for their film. They developed the first digital camera. It was a clunky one, but the company decided, you know what, we're going to focus on film because that's always been our market, and that's not a bad thing to do. If you've got a company that's known and has great niche in a particular market, you don't want to throw that away, but you have to be mindful of what other people are doing, okay? And even though they had a focus on film, they declined to supply film to the Olympics in the mid-'80s. And eventually, they went bankrupt in 2012. And then finally, with Yahoo, they had the chance to buy Google and Facebook. And they didn't for various reasons. In one case, they walked away from it. In another one, they lowered the price. And look where Yahoo is today. It's still around in name, but it's been bought by, is it Verizon? Yeah. So, sorry? The results from instilling growth mindsets. These are some of the benefits that you have. You're going to feel empowered. You can take control of your life. I mentioned earlier you can take control of your thoughts, but when you've got a growth mindset, things aren't going to bother you. And again, I know that I focus a lot on corporate things because it's what I work in, but this is true for any part of your life. You take control of your life. You control your thoughts. You can do yourself a lot of good. You can buy meditation tapes and books and all that, but do yourself the benefit of understanding you can change your life as well. I talked about things that can happen in any kind of business. You can reduce competitiveness if you instill a growth mindset with people, and I've seen this happen in organizations. I work a lot with teams that have been created through mergers and acquisitions, and they often have a lot of fear and distrust because they've been pushed together. You start developing growth mindset. These teams will start working together more. Productivity will rise. Also, having a growth mindset can help you recover from illnesses because you're making yourself feel better. I'm not saying it's a magic pill, but you'll feel better. It will help your body heal more quickly, depending on the illness. So, developing this with your family or at work, whatever it is that you're doing, praise people for the work that they do, for the amount of time that they're willing to devote to something. And understand and value everybody's contribution to what's going on. You appreciate their collaboration. You teach them. I've been talking about the inner dialogue, and teach people how to reframe their thoughts. If they say, this is never going to work, say, it's just not working yet. Just those little changes can make a big difference in what people think and do. Oh, there was one last one, which is the reframing. I did say that, thank you. So some more quotes that I like. I like quotes because I think they encapsulate better than I can what growth mindset is. Without new questions, there's no place for new answers. And this is what was happening with a lot of those companies that have gone bankrupt. Clay Christensen, fewer priorities, less projects, more benefits, better results. Basically, simplify. Bring it down to the basics. So we're going to pass by that exercise because it's just not in the right element. But I'll tell you about it, and it might be something that you want to use or try at some point. And what the exercise is, I have people, what's the word I want to say? Imagine that they're working with a team. It could be your colleagues at work, it could be even your family, something's going on. And they're starting to get angry about things. They're starting to work in silos. There's no collaboration. They're starting to complain about each other. And this kind of thing, in any kind of environment, family or corporate, can start to spiral out of control. And the exercise is to take that, and you might even have an example for your own life that you could use this for, where you then say, now with my knowledge of growth and fixed mindsets, limiting beliefs, how could I deal with this? How could I change a situation where people are backbiting each other, not getting along, not wanting to work together? Because you can use your understanding of these concepts to make that change, yeah? Oh, the exercise. How can I change that? How can I using my knowledge, is that it? Of growth and limited mindsets and limiting beliefs. How can I use my knowledge of what this means to make a change in this situation by introducing the way that you talk with people? Also, by the way, what are you saying in your mind when you're thinking about this problem? Oh, this will never go away. I don't know what to do about it. I wish they'd go away. Shut up. Whatever comes up. Just check yourself to see what your mindset is about that. Now, this is something that I bring up because I used to get a lot of questions about, well, if we want to do this kind of work, it takes 10,000 hours. And this comes from actually a reporter who had interviewed Malcolm Gladwell when his book Outliers came out. And he actually misquoted a bit what Malcolm had written in the book, which was actually talking about the work of a Swedish psychiatrist who works at a university in the States. I think he's in Florida. And actually what this fellow had said is, yes, 10,000 hours, but it has to be really focused practice on things, not just 10,000 hours generally. And I just like to point that out because people this was very popular for a while, this concept. You have to work really hard to get perfect at something and to really make a change. It's not true. You don't need, you'll be better. I mean, I'll give you an example. I've been playing tennis since I was 5 years old, and I'm sure that I've had more than 10,000 hours, and I'm still in the bottom quarter of my league at my tennis club. So I've put a lot of time into that. Have I put dedicated time and focused time? Maybe not so much. One other thing here that I thought was amusing, that Malcolm Gladwell and Erickson got into a public spat about this, which I always find amusing when people that are public personalities. And Erickson said, "You've quoted me wrong," and Gladwell said, "You don't understand what talent is." And this went on for many months, and I think they're still arguing about it. So we go to the next slide. So again, this is small, sorry, I didn't realize there was going to be so many of you, but developing a growth mindset, just to repeat some of the things that I said, listen to your internal dialogue. And I'm going to give you an exercise that you can do outside this. You listen to that, talk back with a growth mindset, either to yourself or people that you're dealing with, family, friends, where you work. Replace the word failing with the word learning, because every mistake we make is a chance to learn. View your challenges as opportunities, however difficult it might be. Think to yourself, I can try this. I'll come up with some idea of how I can tackle this. I've mentioned this already. If you find yourself in a negative spiral, say stop and think of some positive things. And then you can't see. Do you have a camera with you? You're welcome to come up and take a picture. Okay. Listen to your internal dialogue. Talk back with a growth mindset. Use the word learning instead of failing. View challenges as opportunities. View challenges as opportunities. The next one was the exercise I mentioned earlier, where if you're having a lot of negative spiral thoughts, say stop, to stop your mind from doing that. And finally, knowing the limits of a growth mindset, which I'd mentioned earlier as well. Every day we are a mixture of both. It's normal, it's natural. Don't beat yourself up if you find that you're having a limited mindset, because it's natural. Sometimes having a limited mindset can help, because you can see the opposite in a situation, and sometimes that's useful. In fact, I often would say to the teams that I manage, there's always one on a team that would be a real pain in the you-know-what, always saying, asking questions and saying, I just don't see how that's going to work. And you could look at that as being negative, or you could look at that as they're looking at this from a completely different perspective. We might learn something from this, so let's just see how we can use these questions to learn something better or different. And the next one, this is the thing that I always suggest people try. For the next 21 days, keep a loose track of what your thoughts are. Okay, and you might also listen to the people that are around you. Loved ones, family, who also are loved ones, people that you work with. Notice what they're saying as well. And then take a look at responding to your own thoughts and to your colleagues. I do this a lot with executive clients. I won't go into the details of why I do it. I'll just say, just write down for about, I tell them 3 days, but do it quite focused, and then we work on it. But over 21 days, you're going to start to see a pattern of how you're thinking about things, and you could actually stop yourself. You can see, what is it that I normally go negative on? What am I telling myself every day? And once you become aware of that, you can start changing it. And this again goes back to the idea of confidence as well. If you're thinking, I can't do it, I'm too tired, I don't know if I can start a new business, I don't know if this is right for me, reframe that. Every time you think the thought, reframe it, because the more you keep doing that, the less emotional impact those thoughts will have on you. And, oh good, I'm going to be right on time on this. Remember, see, it's still today. Remember, mindsets can go either way. You can have a growth mindset. You can have a limited mindset. You have the power to choose. These thoughts are not controlling you. You're controlling them. And finally, if you do choose a growth mindset, you have success. Okay? And that's basically what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. Oh, 3 minutes to spare. So I went through that quickly. Do we have any questions? Oh, we have one. I'm going to sit down. Oh.
Is there an ideal way of noting the thoughts that we think? Like maybe once a day, in the evening, or every time we catch ourselves thinking something, just grab a pen and write it down?
Well, I think if you put down every negative thought you have, it can get overwhelming. But I always say to people, do what works for you. So sometimes people have a lot of thoughts in the morning, or they have them when they go to bed in the evening. The idea is not to capture every single thing that you have, but at least get some representative example of how you're thinking during the day. So you might find at a certain point you're having certain negative thoughts, and you might just catch yourself doing that. Write those thoughts down. Does that make sense? Because this isn't supposed to be a prescriptive kind of exercise where you're laboriously writing everything down. It doesn't matter. If you do it for 21 days, you will get an example of how you're thinking about things. Okay? Does that make sense? You guys are laughing a lot in the back, so I wanted to know what the joke was back there. You were making me smile because you were smiling back there. Any other questions? Oh. The success photograph.
The success photograph.
Yeah. Oh, the exercise. Oh, this one. Okay. Yeah, you're welcome to come up. I don't know if they're going to be sending any of the presentations around, but you're welcome to come up and take a picture of anything. Any other questions? Was this helpful? Was it useful? Yes? Oh, I'm really pleased, because we got kind of an interesting start. You first, and then I'll come back to you. Come back to back. There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting.
Thank
And
you.
I'd just like to know, you've done NLP, I've done NLP, I've done CBT and mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, what does RTT give in addition to all those other types of therapies?
That's a great question. I'll be very happy to answer that. Sorry that I'm turning my back on you. I'm just going to get back here. The thing that so this is a personal thing, and different people may have a different answer to this, but with NLP, I haven't studied CBT, but NLP, yes, and I've done some mindfulness. But with RTT, it's such a range of tools to use. Now, NLP is very cerebral. It's language patterns. It's Ericksonian things. It's a meta model and things like that, which is absolutely brilliant because you learn to speak hypnotically. And Marisa studied NLP as well. You can see that when you're studying RTT. And I actually used to do fast phobia cures. I did at the Best U Expo 2 years ago. I was doing that. So I know that it works, and I use it to this day. But I felt that I wanted to work on a deeper level, and I wasn't sure with NLP, and this is no way a negative thing about NLP, but at that time at least, I wasn't sure how long those effects would last. And I had the desire to learn something in addition. And with NLP, I never quite knew where I was. I was using language patterns, and I was watching the physiology of the person and all of that. But RTT takes you through so many different things. And you're going back, as I mentioned earlier, you go back to the scenes. You're changing the belief by taking them back to the deep-seated beliefs that they have that you can't access with the conscious mind. NLP will do that by changing the pictures and by using language in trance. But I just felt RTT gave me more. And I've never regretted doing it. And I've got so much success with it. And in the beginning, of course, the clients that come in are never as easy as when Marisa's working, because she always makes it look easy, but she's been doing it for 30 years and it's her process. And people would come in and I'd say, what do I do with that? And I'd say, oh, I know, I can use this technique. So if someone doesn't have a scene, there's other things that you can use. So.
Do you always get a memory?
No, you don't always get a memory, but there are ways that you can work around it. I said earlier you can go for feeling. Sometimes they don't have feelings, but then you can do something called RFPI. There's other I won't go through all the techniques on it, but you can get the information that you need even if they don't have scenes. Without the memory, yes. Eventually they will get the memory. I had someone here with a question. Someone up here had a question. Oh, are we done? I'm really sorry, but I'll be around. You can come ask me questions when we're out of the session, okay? Thank you.